Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm delighted today to be joined by none other than Jason Busch. Jason, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me. So I'm Andrew Daly. I'm the founder of Every Daily and Agentic Procurement, and I'm here to talk to Jason about his return to the world of startups in procurement tech. So Jason, most of my audience will know you well, but for those that don't, would you perhaps give us a little potted history of your career dating back to perhaps your time in the early days of free markets?
Absolutely. So most people probably know me as the founder of Spend Matters, but I like to think of myself as one of the employees from free markets, if I were to say legacy. So I started out in the 90s. I decided not to finish a PhD in history, went into management consulting for 2 years, and somehow came across a number of crazy people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with an idea to run reverse auctions over TCP/IP with professional services. And Glenn Meekum and Sam Kinney, in a matter of years, really set in motion what would become category management, strategic sourcing, and lots of other areas. So I describe free markets as the procurement PhD I never got at university. And it was just an exceptional experience. And we're actually having our 25th reunion of the free markets team coming up in a couple of weeks. So there's dozens of us going, and it really set forth many careers and a whole bunch of startups as well. So spent time there. Then I launched my own firm, which became Spend Matters. Been involved in a whole bunch of other businesses over the years as well. The themes are generally procurement, data, and tech. I like to think of myself as much an analyst as a creator or entrepreneur. I love looking and studying subjects. And the major one right now I didn't want to sit on the sidelines for is this evolution to what I'm describing with some of my new colleagues as an AI employee workforce.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a tremendous shift in the next few years. These aren't co-pilots. It's not agents. It's not Agentic. It's something radically different. So I turned 50 last year, and I decided to get back in the software game because I didn't want to be left behind. I think a lot of us who are high performers, at least in parts of our career, have a fear of being irrelevant. We like to be useful to the world. And I didn't think I could continue to be useful unless I really learned by doing. So I got involved in a new startup, which is building AI employees for procurement and supply chain. It's a bit of my history. There's lots of other things as well. I'm into a bunch of other subjects besides procurement. I'm a longevity and fitness geek. I probably spend too much time running on trails for my health, but love getting out in nature as well. So that's me.
Yeah, well, I was alarmed by our conversation in London earlier in the year, where you were telling me about what you do to yourself if you have a few drinks of an evening. What was it? You're out running? Is it at 4 a.m. in the morning?
Actually, I confess, this is one of those mornings. I tied one on with a couple of entrepreneurial friends in the procurement tech sector last night who were in Chicago. And it was 1 a.m. bedtime, 6 a.m. wake up to go run. But I think you owe it to yourself if you're going out to face the consequences in the morning. And there's no better way of doing that than going out on a run on a few hours of sleep. I know it's counterintuitive, but it typically gets you in bed earlier most nights.
Yeah, well, you've got stronger constitution than me if you can go and do that at that time in the morning, Jason. I'm more of an evening exerciser myself, but there we go. So 25 years, free markets, you must be very excited about going to that. And one of my first questions was what's going to bring you back into startup land, but you've obviously already covered that. But I mean, what was the moment when you realized with this AI era but at what point do you think, well, this changes everything, and it sort of stimulated that excitement to come back in?
Playing around with foundational models last year, and I've not been in the code for over 30 years, really, since I was early college and high school. But I've been one level above the code, and I started playing around last year. And there were a lot of problems with the models, a lot of challenges, especially, doing reasoning and computation. You would encounter mistakes. But at the same time, as somebody who I said is an analyst and a writer, I was amazed at how I could teach it to sound like me. I was amazed at how I could delegate tasks to it and get an answer that was better than an intern usually. And I knew these things would improve really fast. And I had these guys come up to me after DPW last year. They saw me speak, and virtual discussion, but they said in their accents, they're from Israel, "We're building AI employees for procurement. We'd love your feedback." And I'm always happy to take calls from entrepreneurs. You never know where things will go. And I thought it was a pretty good pitch, and I started correcting it. And then I got to know the CTO who ran Israel's Quantum Computing Center. And I realized if anybody can build this, this team can build this. So I was the first angel investor, but I started informally working for it because I was learning so much and really getting my feet wet around it. And then seeing all the challenges in building it. It's very, very hard to build. It's a deep tech build, even with everything coming out, at least once a month right now in terms of model updates. It's really challenging, but I thought we could pull it off. So I got more deeply involved. And again, for me, I don't know what I'll be doing in 10 years. I'm sure it will involve procurement technology, but all aspects of procurement technology are going to be influenced by this in the future. So I really thought after the hiatus from free markets, and even though I've been involved in Metal Miner, which is metals price data and forecasting, Public Spend Forum, which is supply chain data and public sector, been involved in investing in different businesses through Metal Miner related to direct materials over the years, had one exit there. I haven't been, in the code or one level above the code every day for 25 years. And I felt that now is, again, a revolutionary era. And, I'd rather be part of that revolution than be buried by it.
Yeah, indeed. Just to touch on the business before we get into the broader conversation. So you've just rebranded recently from Velon to Gain. And when you look at the website, what I find really interesting is the fact that you've given each different person from the procurement department a different sort of persona. So what was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so first of all, the website as it stands today is just an interim site. We'll be much prouder of the one that's launching in the next week or two. So depending on when this airs, hopefully there's more on it. But really from day one, even before we had production code, the idea was to personify this workforce, put it in human terms. And one of our theories, and this is not original, I think I credit Chamath with this from the All In podcast, is if you look at the modules which SAP, Oracle in our sector, Coupa, Ariba, you name it, Evalua sell. So many of the job titles in procurement have grown up in the past 20 years based on the available modules by technology providers. And it just seems so backwards to me that we fill human roles based on the available tech, like category management. Category management is multifaceted. And I would argue, ideally it sits between many individuals. Commodity management is part of category management, yet it isn't in most companies. There's many other aspects involved besides just staying on top of your suppliers, for a given supply chain, ideally at multiple tiers in manufacturing, and then understanding the commodity inputs. It's complicated, but still we have roles which are created based on the available tech modules. So I thought the beauty of AI employees was we could correspond to the human jobs getting done today, but then we could begin to cross over. So, Natalie is a category manager and negotiator. Does she have the capable tech of a sourcing specialist today who does Agentic? No, but she's fairly autonomous, and you can make her entirely autonomous once you trust her. And then Bob seemingly looks simple, but is traffic cop on top of SAP and is making decisions which specialized tech used to make with humans not in the loop, but humans making the decision using the tech. So it's a radical difference. And I think we can blow up this notion of the humans are slave to what the large tech providers want to sell. And then they'll take on new roles, using technology like Gain and like others doing similar things. And hopefully add a lot more value than they have in the past.
Yeah, indeed. I think humanizing them with the names is interesting, and it leads me on to my next point, because what prompted me to actually to come and have this conversation with me was a particular post you made on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about humans and agents working together, and you made the point about orchestrating systems of AI agents where humans manage them more like employees than tools, and that really resonates with research I've been doing to skills, because I think people who collaborate with generative AI solutions get a lot more out of it than people who use it as a tool. So that your post really resonates with me. And I think the other thing is that's like, it's part of the transformation that not many people are preparing for just yet, that human reality of managing teams that include agents. How do you see that relationship evolving in practice in procurement teams, Jason?
Well, I think we have a world which is fractal. And even today, I'll talk about how an AI employee works. So an AI employee is not one agent. An AI employee, may be personified, but for a single process or task, there could be hundreds of agents involved and many, many foundational models and other types of technology like RAG, thinking of, different areas of integration and, data cleansing and classification. It gets complicated. But the notion of it being fractal is interesting because at the top, ideally, are still humans, and humans are directing and orchestrating this activity. But I think the notion of what people will do in this world going forward, and those who get ahead, unless they're overseeing an entire function, is they will be conductors of 10 times the amount of work that they could have done previously, and they're going to do it in many cases, I think, better. The bar for us launching Gain as a commercial product is it needs to be better than humans. It's like self-driving. And what I mean by better is it needs to make fewer mistakes. A Tesla self-driving car, if it crashes and kills its occupants or someone else, is front page news, in the Times, the Wall Street Journal, you name it. Yeah. If a human dies in a car accident, it's not the case. If a human dies, the situation, if they're driving, is just regular, news. Unfortunately, where I live in the rural Midwest outside of Chicago and Indiana, there's highway deaths all the time. It's just the fact of life. When AI employees make mistakes, though, it will be front page news.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you need to be better. And so as these things get better than humans in consistency, accuracy, and obviously speed, what is the human's job? The human is to manage 10 of these and then 100 of them, and to get things done in parallel, and then to humanize and communicate what is going on. Obviously, you're going to maintain human relationships on the strategic supplier side. Something that came up in a podcast I did yesterday with someone is what happens, when suppliers have the same capability. Yeah. And it's AI employee to AI employee. Today it may be agent to agent, but in the future, literally, if you imagine that if you're a chess player, and you have your own styles of play, you're playing 100 simultaneous games by inputting your logic and plans into a system, and then it's playing someone else who again is playing hundreds of games at the same time, again with your approach. So it's a, I hate to sound cliche, but it's a brave new world.
It is. It is. And what kind of behaviors, skills, and mindsets are going to be required from the humans to thrive in this new era? Because after that, the skills is a subject very close to my heart,
Of course. I think certainly the ability to manage small, nimble teams who are much more flat. And also, I think when I got started at Free Markets, it was a crazy era in software. I was a kid, I was 24, 25, but nobody cared about my age because I knew more about the topic at the time and the tech than people twice my age.
Yeah.
The same is happening right now. If you're not willing to embrace, let's call them kids who are half our age,
yeah,
who are truly natives with not only, either deep data science or more limited data science, but understanding how these things work and how to scale them. you're not going to be as successful. So I think, much like in management consulting, the pyramid is collapsing in certain cases. I think the pyramid may collapse in procurement and supply chain. I think we will have smaller, nimble teams who are incredibly high performance. I think similarly as well from a talent perspective, and this is a bigger macro theme, but a really important one, is as consulting firms hire less. And I think this is the same theme. There's much less on-campus recruiting in the States. I think the same is true in the UK as well.
Yeah,
it's certainly true of graduate business programs here. Companies are going to have a chance to get talent from business programs which may have gone previously into consulting or banking or a different profession, and they'll be able to, hoover it up for procurement and supply chain. But again, it's a skill set coming out of universities where I don't care that somebody can run a discount and cash flow model if they went to a finance program. I don't care they can, manage scorecards because they took a class in supply management. I care that they can do many activities at once and are comfortable with this kind of agentic world today and AI employee world tomorrow. The soft skills, I think, become really key too, in terms of, selling up and selling internally. It's also cliche, but, in many cases over the years, the best folks in procurement have been the best folks in sales. They're the same people.
Yeah.
And those sales skills become really important in procurement, especially if we have a world where AI employees are optimizing on the quantitative side for us. We still need to sell what they're doing and why they're doing it to everybody around us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at, we've been trying to define the skills of the AI era in procurement, and there's an interesting balance between what you might describe as tech skills and software or human skills. We're just getting back to that generational sort of dynamic you talked about there. That's fascinating because you're right. These digital natives that are coming out of university now. My daughter just graduated this summer, so she's very much grown up with a smartphone in her hand. She's in that category. You look at the sort of what gets the most out of the generative models, for example. I was listening to a guy called Jeremy Stanford, Jeremy Utley, rather, who teaches at Stanford, who's somebody I listened to on his podcast, Beyond the Prompt. And their discussion about how it's the experienced people at our end of the career that will get most out of the models if they engage them, because you train the model, you share all that experience, all that knowledge, and that in itself is a variable in what you get back from the generative models. So there's still a place for us, those who've got a few grey hairs, Jason, I think.
Absolutely. But, words of advice I give to people, especially, my age or 40s or older than me right now, is you got to dive back in head first. Like you do not want to sit on the sidelines. I think what's pretty cool is I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who have not been entrepreneurs before, just building things for the first time, because, anybody can code. I don't know Python script. I don't know how to debug it, but I'm coding in Python.
Yeah.
I'm explaining it in English, and, I'm sure it will scare a lot of my friends that Jason's vibe coding, but I'm doing it.
Well, intellectual curiosity is something which gets spoken about at all the events that we go to, all the presentations. The value of intellectual curiosity, I would argue, it's never been more an asset than now in the era of Gen AI in particular, because the more your curiosity drives you, the more you can engage and collaborate with Gen AI tools, and the more you will get back, and it can start to fill in the gaps of where your weak spots are, or you can use it as a coach or a strategic thought partner. The more you're driven by that desire to learn and develop, the more AI can help you, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the mindset they need in procurement in particular, to embrace this whole era, really.
Definitely. I think in general, curiosity is really important. I think a willingness to fail is important as well. And to learn, much like in software development, you want to fail fast. Yeah. So it's okay to run a bunch of programs, but you don't want the proverbial failed procurement implementation after 3 years. You want to run these tests on ideas, things you may develop internally, startups you may want to work with. And, the model is such that you can start small and scale. The other thing too, I think, is to, look for models out there which kind of break the paradigm of SaaS. So, look to pay for things on a compute basis or task basis.
Yeah.
In the end, you're tying the value to what you're getting. Exactly. So, it literally could be tied to compute if you're building it yourself. Or, if you're working with third parties, look for those who will have the Harvey type business models. Everybody talks about Harvey is a company that sells to law firms and does AI based automation. So, an associate can be 3 times as valuable and more consistent at a law firm. They went from, I think it was 4 million in revenue at the start of 2024 to a run rate over 100 million at the start of 2025, because they scaled on that task-based pricing, that it's valuable, so people use it. And, you shouldn't have to think you got to spend $1 million to get a program off the ground.
Yeah. So was that driven by them as the provider rather than the actual buyer? Because if you think about the buying dynamic between procurement and say this new era of AI native businesses, for example, is it on the AI native businesses to say, well, we're going to price this way, rather than on the procurement team to say, hang on, we don't like the SaaS model, we want to go down a different route of value-based pricing? Who takes the initiative there, Jason?
I think the vendors are incented, especially if they're new, to look at consumption-based pricing models, because it does a much better job aligning value, and investors are rewarding models which can hockey stick based on that. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of, night of the living dead SaaS companies, which, went from 2 to 5 to 10, even to 20 million in ARR. I was talking to someone last night about a couple of them, both in the procurement sector, but in some other sectors. And you just have these businesses which stall out because adoption slows, customer sat drops, investors don't know what to do with them. And everybody's tired of that. The notion of aligning value based on consumption, but one thing I will say is, models which are truly value-based and you share in the value are really hard to sell into procurement and make them last. I remember at Free Markets, we said, we're going to try and take, a fifth of savings or something at the beginning. And in theory, those models can work, but if you're successful, you get kicked out because people don't like paying you the money. Yeah. So, price based on consumption and discounted as you use more of it if you're a vendor. And if you're a buyer, ask to see results, before doing a big commitment, and to scale gradually in the same way.
Yeah, but procurement has an opportunity to rethink the way it evaluates this now. So it'd be interesting to see how that shift happens over the course of the next few years. Changing tack a little bit now, Jason, back to your sort of agents and your AI employees. So imagine you're designing a future fit procurement function from scratch, okay, fully agent enabled. What would that operating model look like? What's gone, what's new, what's redesigned? What's your vision for that?
So if I were to start from scratch, and I actually have 2 different friends in the process of going to work for high growth startups as CPOs now.
Right.
So, classic, company hires a CPO when they hit 50 million or 100 million in revenue, and they're quadrupling every year. So they can start from scratch, and they're, quite interested in saying, how do I look at my overall budget and not separate it between headcount, consulting, outsourcing, and software? It's all one. So, if I know I'm going to get the leverage on the tech side now in a level that I haven't before, whether it's, Agentic or whether it's making the jump to AI employees, then I need a team who can manage them. And it's going to be a smaller team. It may be more senior. It may also be a team which is fairly tech savvy. So instead of just having one person who's overseeing my tech systems and my tech selections for procurement and related areas, that's really what this team does. It troubleshoots, it makes things work. And, from the start, that team could even be within the IT organization, but it happens to be within procurement, ideally with some of the skills behind it. So I think you have much smaller teams. I think you're commingling budgets between, tech and people. I think at the same time as well, having new governance structure in terms of understanding all the vectors of data and security. So, what often doesn't get stated around, the world of AI is that you're creating new attack vectors. So, somebody can, I won't say, hack an agent, but you could get agents to expose information which they're not supposed to.
Right.
In the past, I mean, there have been some scandals, obviously, with e-procurement systems. There was one with Ariba and Best Buy probably 15 years ago, where there was collusion between a buyer and supplier over Ariba. And, even with Ariba or Coupa or whomever, there can be fraud with employees if a buyer, conspires with a supplier. In the AI world, in theory, you can spot that before anything happens. But there are actually other attack vectors that suppliers or bad actors can pursue. So having governance and security as part of, overseeing all of this becomes really important at the same time. So, I think we have in a few years, 10% the number of those doing sourcing and managing categories.
As low as that. As low as that, you think?
Yeah, I think they become the agent managers.
Right.
We probably bump up the tech headcount in procurement, for tech selection, overseeing these systems. We probably add almost a risk and compliance layer. So GRC merges a bit in with procurement. But as part of that, it's almost like there's a CISO within the procurement function for cyber risk and other risk.
Yeah.
Again, that this AI world creates. So it's a shifting of headcount. It's definitely a deeper tech skill set, and it's flatter. Yeah. We're probably going to have a higher paid workforce, but we're going to have fewer of them.
Yeah, different jobs, different skills, and different sort of dynamic across the experience range. And so, so more tech skills, obviously, as you just highlighted there. But for the procurement people, there's people who are still engaged in procurement activities. Do you envisage their skill set changing materially?
The need to know nuance on negotiation and game theory goes away unless you're an academic and you're curious about it. I like to read about game theory just because I'm curious. But if your AI employee, has read, Jacob's book, from Jacob from Maersk, he's got his own firm now, Moneyball.
Yeah.
CPH, I think it's called. Anyway, Jacob, a great example, Jacob took up the mantle from Sam Kinney and Glenn Meekum at Free Markets as the auction expert. He's done an amazing job and he's taken it further. Well, if my AI employees read his books, and others, they're expert and they can apply, literally the latest in game theory. They can figure out what the constraints should be in a combinatorial optimization situation.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to bring their own solver or, plug into Coupa ASO or Orchestration or something else, or Kilvar, and do a better job than humans at coming up with the constraints and running scenarios.
Yeah.
So the human knowledge becomes less important for those areas, unless it's a fact check or gut check, because the AI employees come with superhuman skills in terms of knowing if there's a corpus you can train them on, and then you can make sure that they're not going off piste when there's an edge use case.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable what they can do.
Indeed, and we've highlighted in our 7 skills for the year, we've highlighted critical thinking. To your point there about actually being able to ensure that the what the AI is delivering is correct and effective and doesn't sort of create any issues. And I think that is a fundamental skill. But of course, that still needs a base level of knowledge to be able to apply that critical thinking to the scenario you're talking about, where Jacob's sort of learnings and experience have been shared with AI, which is then able to use them more effectively than a human. But humans still got to be able to sort of police that to a degree. So it's an interesting dynamic again, but a shifting skills, shifting mindset, I think, for people that are doing that job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my advice to everyone, if they want to get into this field, I was talking to someone at an event last night who's got a 16-year-old daughter, is, yes, it can make sense to intern. It can make sense to, if you're in the States, if you want to do procurement, look at like Arizona or Penn State or Georgia Tech or Michigan or one of those schools with programs. But at the same time, just start building and using tech on your own with AI today. Create an app, see what you can do with it. That's the skill set of people we're going to want in this function, and the sky's going to be the limit. The other thing I would say too is, I think the notion of higher education and universities in terms of where we hire, quote, grads from will change. I think we will see programs of apprenticeship and, organizations who take risks on cohorts who may come from non-traditional communities. They may not come from, and we call it in the States a Big Ten university. They may not have a college degree, but they show aptitude and interest, and they can be trained, because what we used to learn in university, whether it was in business or whether the social sciences or math or hard sciences, when we have a world where these problems can be solved for us at our fingertips faster and better than we can do it, you can train people without university degrees, I believe, to do the work of those who have them and potentially even do it better.
Yeah. I was at an event in London in June, and there was a discussion about this very topic, and somebody said, well, wouldn't gamers be the perfect people to manage a team of agents, because they can interact with technology at high pace, juggle various different things at one time. Their brains are sort of wired to operate that way. And it really got everyone thinking that. I thought, well, that's quite a sort of left field suggestion. But actually, the more you thought about it, the more I thought, actually, as a sort of bit of a gamer myself, I'm thinking that's got some merit, actually, as a sort of capability to be able to operate in that world.
Absolutely. But don't just think about gaming. Think about, for example, drone licenses in America. You can get your P107 commercial drone license. My 19-year-old got it. He's been flying drones since he was 13 or 14, somewhat illegally, because he was doing some commercial photo shoots with it in factories when he was younger. But now he has that license, and it's kind of golden in terms of what you can do with it.
Yeah.
It's 50 hours of work, but he's, planning to apply that. I think it helped him. He wants to go into aviation in the military here. And I think it helped him jump the queue, just because he had done drone work. So drones, games, all that stuff, becomes valuable.
Yeah, indeed. So you touched on a point earlier about the disruptions of the consulting model, and you've posted about this as well, Jason, about how traditional SaaS vendors and consulting firms may struggle to adapt. How they're changing their go-to-market model needs to be thought about carefully, particularly when agents are driving so much of the outcomes, in some of their activity. What do you envision in the consulting market in particular over the next few years? Because you obviously got a strong background in that area yourself.
Yeah, I think consulting is already getting dramatically upended. The traditional, I think consultants will see the traditional, cost takeout work, slowly become less and less in front of them, in terms of just countless opportunities. I think you'll see firms which, adopt leverage models with agentic capability and AI employees. We're talking to a bunch of them to actually use these things. We'll be able to deliver much more efficiently to clients. I think you'll see a situation like, clients want to buy McKinsey's knowledge management system because they put so much into it. And, the value of how do you query it and use it and what you get out of it, may be similar if you're, facile with it compared to hiring a team for a study. You might just be able to pay millions of bucks a year for the corpus and get what you need. So I think there are so many scenarios for consultancies. They can become, knowledge and data providers. They can learn to use these technologies on a leverage basis. I think new firms will emerge. I do think this whole area of governance and risk, kind of a procurement supply chain CISO for these solutions, becomes absolutely critical. I don't think procurement is ready for, all the risk the tech presents. I think you'll see consultants specializing in that area emerge and do quite well. But the notion of the pyramid still existing. I think the world is going to look much more like Alex Partners and Alvarez and Marcel, where, you know, it's almost like a 1-to-1 ratio between partners, managers, and associates.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be quite that flat, but you're going to have teams where, and again, I do think, you know, those who succeed in the industry will make more than ever, especially, you know, the younger recruits who know this stuff. They'll be able to command real premiums, but there's going to be less and less hiring in terms of absolute headcount.
Yeah, that is a concern for a lot of people, actually. You know, not just in consulting, but, you know, the pressure on teams to deliver more with less, and the fact that the technology is going to enable that. And, you know, there's a lot of talk around, you know, people won't lose jobs to AI, they'll lose it to people using AI better. I think the reality is some teams are going to be smaller, some teams might be larger, but some teams will be smaller, and organisations will be smaller in headcount, and that's a reality which is quite uncomfortable for a lot of people. Just moving back to procurement, my final question for you, really. You know, obviously, you know, I'm very passionate about the skills. What are people saying to you? What are procurement leaders saying to you about the conversation around what they need to start hiring and developing in their teams to be ready for this? Are you having many conversations about that particular topic?
You know, I'm having some, and there's such variance. So some of these discussions are, you know, with old friends who've grown up through the ranks and become heads of procurement, going back to the free market days. Some are new people I meet who reach out to me randomly because they hear about Gain and they're curious about the idea. You know, some just, you know, talking to people at events yesterday, some folks I didn't know. And there is not one answer. It is all over the map right now. I think there is at least 50% in North America are deer in the headlights. They have no, pardon the language, they have no effing clue what is coming down the pike.
Yeah.
And they're seeing these, you know, agents get launched off of their incumbent providers, which do, you know, discrete tasks, and they're kind of wowed by it. And then 3 weeks later, even more capability comes out. And then you surface the concept of AI employees, and, oh, that sounds like years away. And you say, no, we're going GA in 6 to 8 weeks with this. We have, you know, competitors trying to do similar things. This is the way the world's going, really fast.
Yeah.
And I'd say if 50%, 60% are deer in the headlights, 10 or 20% are all in from day one. Like, they want to go.
Yeah.
And my favorite example is we have our largest, you know, client in Gain right now, who will be launching with later this year and next year at scale, actually wants to go autonomous. And what I mean by that is everybody else is very much human in the loop.
Yeah.
You know, before an AI employee does anything with any risk, they want human sign off.
Yeah.
We have this one customer who said, there's so much stuff we don't touch. The AI employee is not going to mess it up. Like, the worst they can do is not be successful. So just go. We want them to just go and run and report back. And, you know, that's the brave new world. It's the trust. And I think more companies next year are going to be a hybrid, that yes, they want human in the loop, but they'll quickly devolve into autonomy when they get comfortable with the fact that, you know, these things can be more consistent and better performing than humans very, very quickly.
I mean, that really is brave. That's the first example I've heard of that, Jason. I mean, the human in the loop is a phrase I hear an awful lot. You know, to go fully autonomous, I've not heard of that yet. But I mean, the point you made about the 50% or so being rabbit in the headlights, then yeah, I think that corresponds with what I'm seeing in Europe, although I'm in similar conversations in the States as well. It's quite interesting. I think for me, the pace of which I'm having conversations now about what is this going to look like is accelerating, but it's still a relatively small number. I think there's certainly the elite that are, you know, the elite procurement functions that have been ahead on digital and now are ready to embrace, you know, the AI era. There's certainly good examples of that, and we see that at DPW, procurement leaders, etc. But I think that is still a relatively small proportion of the profession. I think there's a chunk that are aware stuff is coming and are sort of into the, okay, so what are we going to do about this? And I think they're the conversations that I'm having mainly. But there's a whole raft that are like, whether it be fear, you know, sort of inability to deal with the technical complexity, or hiding behind things like compliance or data or whatever it may be, they were just sort of thinking, this is not happening. And I think that's best example I can give you of that is I was in a keynote at a conference in London earlier on this year. About 250 people were in the room, and the keynote said, hands up who's experimented with generative AI solutions. And I was one of 7 people who raised their hand out of 250, and it was all procurement people. And I was just amazed at such a low percentage of people had actually experimented in personal or professional lives. So I think a lot of people are still a bit scared, or whatever emotions it is, negative emotions are not really getting started. So I think hopefully the elite can start to show the way forward, and we'll get the fast followers, and then we'll get some momentum in it, because it's an exciting time. So finally,
I think,
go on, sorry.
I think it's I was going to say too, I think it's really democratizing.
Yeah.
Historically, you could point to the world-class procurement organizations. They were the same 10, 20 years ago, the ExxonMobils of the world, Walmart, I think I don't want to just single out, companies and others, but Pfizer, they're P&G, right? I mean, like we all know who's always been good. This is a chance within 5 years for companies which, may have been bottom performers in, a Hackett or Kearney, survey, to dramatically upskill and get to the 80%. And that hasn't existed before. It's such a chance to play catch up and move fast. And I think the comfort level will dramatically increase next year. I think there's been a lot of disillusionment with how foundational models worked until now. And I think you're going to see a number of companies like Gain, essentially solve the issues when companies were trying to build their own agentic capability, and they're going to solve it in niches. Yeah. And it's going to scale very fast.
Indeed. So if you've got one piece of advice for that procurement leaders that's in that organization that's sort of deer in the headlights, as you say, and not got started, if you've got one piece of advice for them to experiment with agentic AI, what would it be, Jason? How do they get moving?
I would establish a budget and look at 5 different pilot projects with 5 different companies. Right. And I would make them orthogonal. There could be overlap, but I would try and do different things and solve problems which have not been solved before. And some of that could be very, quote, unstrategic. Some of it might be, addressing spend that's not been addressed, like the true tail. Others might be process efficiency over, the time to put contracts in place, or truly, how do we make sure that we're not doing a three-way match, but how do we do kind of the end level match against all contract objects with commodity indices and everything else with agents before invoices are paid? And that also, might rely on a new contract management approach and system too. I mean, the list goes on, but I would pick 5 pilot initiatives, and I probably would, look at companies which have started in the past 18 months to solve them versus the incumbents.
Yeah, getting those sort of startups working with you, because of course there's a vested interest for those organizations to invest in, ideally, a potential enterprise level customer of the future. So that co-build mindset, I think, can serve both parties well. Wonderful. Jason, I'm very conscious of your time. So we've covered an awful lot there. There's so much more we could cover. I'm sure we could perhaps revisit that in the future, but I'm very, very grateful for your time and your insights into what you're doing and particularly what you're building at Gain. I suppose the obvious way for anyone who's interested in following up more about what Gain are doing is to get in touch with you via LinkedIn. Is that the obvious place to start? Yep, LinkedIn is great. So we publish a lot there. Yeah, you're not the only one. I'm quite fond of it myself. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you find it really insightful. Of course, you can get Jason or myself on LinkedIn if you want to follow up on any of the topics we've discussed. For me, it's particularly about skills. Of course, Jason, we've covered his areas of expertise, of which there are many. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Andrew. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Jason.